Welcome to Echoing Tales. Today's story, 15 Days, invites you into a world where time weaves a mysterious thread between destiny and discovery and explores the profound impact of choices made when the clock begins to tick. Amol lay sprawled on his bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan as it spun lazily above him. His laptop sat open beside him, a half-written CV glowing faintly on the screen. He had been meaning to update it for months, but somehow there was always tomorrow. He liked to blame the sluggish job market for his unemployment, a convenient scapegoat for a man who had earned an MBA last year, yet hadn't landed a single job offer. Deep down, though, he knew the truth. It wasn't the market, it was him, Amol Gupta, always taking life at his own pace, always thinking there was more time. He was the eldest son of Mr. and Mrs. Gupta, their pride and joy from the moment he entered the world. When Amol was born, pink and healthy, his parents were over the moon. He was a perfect baby, hitting milestones faster than other kids his age, rolling over, sitting up, walking, all before anyone expected. They couldn't have been prouder. Gifted, the neighbors would call him. Strangers marveled at his sharp mind and mischievous smile. His parents fed his curious nature with colorful toys and children's books, nurturing his potential with love and attention. At 3, he joined preschool, and the teachers adored him too. He was bright, playful, a little rascal at times, but always charming enough to get away with it. Life seemed like a fairy tale, every chapter filled with achievements, laughter, and unrelenting praise. By the time he turned 4, Amol was in school, ready to take on the world. That was when everything began to change. Mrs. Gupta was pregnant again, and soon after, baby Vihan arrived. Amol adored his little brother, doting on him in the way only an older sibling could. But as Vihan grew, it became clear something was different. While Amol had soared through his milestones, Vihan struggled. His first words came late, his steps unsteady. Concern turned into worry, and the Guptas found themselves at a doctor's office searching for answers. The diagnosis hit like a thunderclap. Vihan was on the autism spectrum. From that moment, the balance of their household shifted. The once vibrant spotlight that had shone on Amol dimmed as his parents poured their energy into Vihan's care. Every tiny victory of Vihan's, saying a new word, making eye contact, was celebrated with boundless joy. And though Amol loved his brother, he couldn't help but feel his own accomplishments fade into the background, unremarked and unseen. So Amol adapted. He learned to take care of himself, growing independent far earlier than most kids. But something else began to grow alongside his self-reliance, a creeping complacency. Why strive when no one seemed to notice? Why push himself when mediocrity seemed to go unnoticed too? He was still bright, still clever, but the fire within him dimmed, replaced by a slow burning apathy. And now here he was, years later, a grown man with an MBA and no job, lying on his bed, staring at a CV he couldn't muster the energy to complete. Somewhere deep down, the little boy who had once been the apple of his parents' eyes still lingered, waiting for someone to notice him again. The doorbell rang, its sharp chime cutting through the stillness of the house. Amol groaned, turning over on the bed. He was too lazy to get up, but he knew he had to. His parents were out of town, leaving Vihan in his care. Vihan, of course, couldn't answer the door. He was likely engrossed in whatever activity had caught his attention in his room. Reluctantly, Amol dragged himself up and shuffled to the door, muttering under his breath. When he swung it open, The sight that greeted him stopped him in his tracks. In the warm glow of the afternoon sun, a tall man stood on the doorstep, dressed sharply in a tailored suit. His face was clean shaven, his hair slicked back with a precision that felt almost unnatural. In his hands, he carried a metallic square box with sleek handles, its surface catching the sunlight and gleaming faintly. There was something about him, something Amol couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was the unnerving sharpness of his pale blue eyes, or the way his smile stretched just a fraction too wide, as though practiced for a moment like this. "Are you Amol Gupta?" the man asked, his voice smooth and practiced. Amol blinked. "Yeah, I am. Who is asking?" The man's smile widened, and he clasped his hands together as if he had just heard the most wonderful news. "Oh, wonderful! May I come in for a few minutes? I've traveled a long way to meet you." Amol's first thought was that this man was a friend of his father's. Perhaps his father had sent him to discuss a job opportunity. Feeling both surprised and hopeful, he stepped aside and gestured for the man to enter. "Sure," Amol said. "Come in." The man stepped into the house, his presence somehow filling the room. "Can I get you some water or—" Amol began, but the man waved him off, his eyes scanning the room before locking onto Amol's. "No, thank you. I won't take much of your time," the man said, lowering himself on the edge of the sofa with an air of practiced ease. "I am here because I am your biggest fan." Amol blinked, got off guard. "My fan? Are you sure you have got the right person?" "I don't exactly have fans." The man chuckled, a deep knowing sound. "Oh, but you will, Amol. I am a time traveler. I've come from the future, where your name is celebrated as one of the greatest science fiction writers of all time." For a moment, Amol stared at him, then burst out laughing. "Oh, good one. Who put you up to this? Was it Rohit? I swear that guy is always coming up with weird pranks." But the man remained calm, his expression serious. "This is not a prank, Amol. I assure you, in my time, your novels have inspired countless scientists, engineers, and dreamers. You are a legend, a modern Jules Verne." Amol raised an eyebrow, folding his arms. "Jules Verne? Look, I don't know what you're talking about, but I've never written so much as a short story in my life." "Not yet," the man said, leaning forward. "But this is the year you begin. Your first novel, The Vortex of Tomorrow, will change everything." Amor shook his head, half amused and half irritated. "Right, and I suppose you're here to give me writing tips or something." The man gave a small enigmatic smile. "No, I cannot interfere with the timeline. I am here only because your work had a profound impact on my life and the lives of so many others. I made this journey in secret just to meet you." And he lifted the peculiar box, placing it on the table. "I would like you to sign your books for me." Amol's skepticism turned to confusion. "Sign my books? What books?" The man opened the box with a smooth click, revealing a strange device with multiple glowing switches and a black case. As he touched the case, it expanded with a mechanical hum, growing 4 times its original size. Inside were hardbound novels, each with vivid, intricate illustrations on the covers. Amol stared, his heart pounding. The first title caught his eye, The Vortex of Tomorrow. "You're kidding," he muttered, reaching out to touch it, but the man quickly pulled it back. "I can't show you what's inside," the man said firmly. That would disrupt the timeline. But please, would you sign it? Dazed, Amol picked up a pen and signed the cover. The man then pulled out another book, The River of Intrigue. Amol scribbled his name, all the while trying to memorize the titles. The Bond of Time, The Echoes of Infinity, The Celestial Divide. One by one, the man laid out nearly 20 books. As Amol signed the last few, his disbelief began to waver, replaced by a strange, creeping excitement. Finally, the man brought out the 21st book. Its cover was more ornate than the others, and the title sent a shiver down Amol's spine. The Strength of Silence. This, the man said softly, is your most famous work. You stopped writing after this. Amol signed it, his hands trembling. Why did I stop? He asked. The man hesitated, then shook his head. I cannot say. At that moment, a noise came from the hallway. Both men turned to see Vihan standing in the doorway, staring silently at the stranger. Without a word, Vihan turned and walked back to his room. That's my brother Vihan, Amol said, his voice quieter now. He's neurodivergent. The man gave Amol a long, knowing look. I know. I've read your biography. You adore him. You have dedicated all your novels to him. Amol felt a lump rise in his throat, unable to respond. The man stood, closing the black case and preparing to leave. As he reached the door, he paused and turned back, his expression uncharacteristically somber. I shouldn't tell you this, he said slowly. But I want to. Spend as much time with your brother as you can. He won't be with you for long. Precisely 15 more days. Before Amol could respond, the man slipped out the door and vanished into the night. For a moment, Amol stood frozen, his mind reeling. Then, snapping out of his daze, he rushed outside. The street was empty, the man was gone. Amol stood in the middle of the living room, the events of the past few minutes replaying in his mind like a broken record. He couldn't make sense of what had just happened. A prank? That seemed like the simplest explanation. But then there was the case, the way it had expanded in size, the books with his name etched on their spines, the vivid illustrations. None of that could be explained. And then there was Vihan. The man's parting words echoed in his mind, chilling him to the core. 15 more days. He bolted toward Vihan's room, his heart racing. As he pushed open the door, he saw his brother sitting at his desk, headphones over his ears, completely absorbed in the music that always calmed him, soft flowing piano melodies. Vihan's head bobbed slightly to the rhythm, his fingers tracing absent-minded patterns on the edge of the desk. Amol stepped forward and placed a hand on Vihan's shoulder. Vihan flinched and immediately shrugged him off, turning to give his brother a brief, annoyed glance before focusing back on his desk. He hated being touched. Amol remembered. That had always been a rule with him. Sorry, Amol murmured, retreating slightly. He sank down onto Vihan's neatly made bed, his eyes scanning the room. The thought of 15 days lingered in his mind, stirring an unexpected mix of emotions. Guilt, fear, relief. Relief most of all. He hated the thought but couldn't deny it. If what the man had said was true, then maybe for the first time in years, he would have his parents' undivided attention. The weight that had always fallen on him, the weight of being the overlooked one, the second priority, might finally be lifted. He looked at Vihan, sitting at his desk, completely unaware of the storm brewing in Amol's mind. His room was meticulous as always. not a single item out of place. Amol's eyes wandered across the shelves. The first rack was filled with neatly arranged books, novels, encyclopedias, and stories of every kind. The second rack held paints, brushes, and sketchbooks. Vihan loved to paint. The third rack had an array of circular toys and balls, perfectly aligned. Vihan had always been fascinated by circular objects. Then, Amol's gaze fell on the bottom rack, where a row of journals sat stacked carefully. He leaned forward, curiosity tugging at him. Vihan never allowed anyone to touch his journals, guarding them as if they were sacred treasures. Amol had never bothered to find out what was inside. But now, something caught his eye, something that made his breath hitch. The spine of the first journal had a title painted on it in bold, careful, handwritten letters: The Vortex of Tomorrow. Amol froze. His mind raced. That was the title of the first book the man had shown him. His eyes darted to the other journals, each with a title scrawled along the spine: The River of Intrigue, The Bond of Time, The Echoes of Infinity. Every single one matched the novels the man had brought from the future. He stumbled to his feet, staring at the journals as if they might come alive. How had he never noticed this before? Then again, how much time had he really spent in Vihan's room? How much attention had he ever paid to his brother's words? His heart pounding, Amol stepped closer to Vihan's desk. His brother was scribbling furiously in another journal, completely absorbed. Amol's eyes flicked to the cover. The Strength of Silence. Amol felt the air leave his lungs. The man had said this was his most famous work, the last one he ever wrote. Vihan? Amol's voice cracked. His brother didn't look up, his pen moving swiftly across the page. Amol sank into the chair beside the desk, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. None of this made sense, and yet the pieces were falling into place with an eerie precision. How long will it take you to finish this one? Amol asked, his voice forced into casualness. 15 days, Vihan said without pausing or looking up. Amol's blood ran cold. He leaned back in the chair, staring at his brother, who remained oblivious to the weight of his words. Something dark began to take root in Amol's mind. A plan, half-formed and sinister. If this was all true, if Vihan really was a writer behind those books, then a slow smile crept across his face, though it didn't reach his eyes. He studied his brother's hunched figure, his delicate movements, the relentless scratching of the pen against paper. For the first time in his life, Amol felt something other than resentment toward Vihan. He felt power. Keep writing, Vihan, he murmured, his voice barely audible. Keep writing. Vihan kept writing, his pen gliding across the pages with the same rhythmic precision. Amol watched him, his breath steady, his fingers pressing lightly against the armrest. The weight of the future no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a door, slightly ajar, waiting to be pushed open. A door he had never noticed before. A flicker of something cold and calculated settled in his mind. Wasn't this how the world worked? The brilliant often went unnoticed, until someone else carried their words forward, shaped them, owned them. Greatness didn't belong to those who merely created. It belonged to those who seized it. Vihan hummed softly, lost in his own world, the notes of the piano melody drifting through the air like a lullaby. Amol leaned back, his lips curving ever so slightly. 15 days. He had all the time he needed. This is an original work of fiction created by Echoing Tales, a brand new channel celebrating the art of storytelling. From heartfelt moments to unexpected twists, we bring you a blend of compelling narratives every week. As we are just starting out, we need your support. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and hit the bell icon to help us keep sharing more captivating stories. Until we meet again in the next tale, stay curious and let every story inspire a new perspective.